So we'll start with the first question, probably, Ankit. A lesser known fact is that you probably come from a family business. So tell us about your early days and your background.
Sure. So, our family business back in Jodhpur, where I come from, is my dad and my family, in general, extended family, are all in textiles. So, a lot of screen printing that you must have heard, hand screen printing that happens. Right. So that's a fairly popular business on those parts. So that's what our background was. That's what we've grown up seeing in our family. All right.
And so what prompted you to get into a startup? Because you have a very illustrious kind of a background, and IIT, I have an IIT background. So what prompted you to get into the startup space?
So when I was a student, I used to get a lot of ideas, and I was fortunate and really privileged to be a part of the ecosystem at IIT Bombay, where I got the opportunity to experiment a lot as a student. And the reason I wanted to do engineering always was that I used to get a lot of these ideas as a kid, and I thought that engineering college will be a space where I'll get to implement my ideas. So when I came to IIT Bombay, I got the privilege of having a very supportive institution. I did not have to spend a single penny on my ideas, and the institute used to give money under an innovation program that we had. And because I did a lot of that, and I had
the sign at IIT Bombay.
So SIGN is a business incubator. There is this innovation cell at IIT Bombay called U Mashruwala Innovation Cell.
Okay.
So it was headed by Professor Amarnath in those days. And so what I did when I came to IIT was that I went to my faculty and I said, I have this idea. Would you, can you give me some money to implement it, right? So I would go with a project plan, and so I used to get some small money, but I kept hopping to a few faculties because they used to get that money out of their project money. So it was never, it was difficult for them to carve out that kind of ad hoc capital, right? So this innovation cell had come up in parallel. And when I got introduced, I sort of found my, space where I could just keep getting ideas, and I would go and get money for those. So because I'd done so much of that as a student, and I had a phenomenal team that I found because of this innovation cell. So I felt that if we do not make use of this privilege that we've been given and do something about the ideas we had, and create a product out of it, and potentially a business as well, then it will be sort of squandering that privilege and not building upon it. So I was quite motivated, to be honest,
sure.
And I did not think a job would help me do that.
You. Okay. I'm sure you would have had a campus placement in any case.
So actually I did not sit for campus placements.
Okay.
And I did not also apply to any other university outside IIT Bombay. So personally I did not, and but I did have to take up a off-campus placement for about 6 months so that I could survive the next 6. Okay. My founding team was still graduating from IIT Bombay at that time, so it really helped me bridge that time, and I was able to kick that job and come and try and start.
Right, great. So for the audience, I think it's important for us to know what Ankit does. Do we have the videos which we can play, please? So Ankit, you could just tell us a little about what is the area in which you work, which is very exciting. It's drone technology.
Yes.
And we'll just watch some videos first.
Yeah, while the video is coming up, it actually started with this one conversation that one of my co-founders had with me, was that I want to make a hovercraft and float it in the Powai Lake. And he had this beautiful idea that we'll take the bikes and scooters that our seniors had left behind and had not, basically they didn't care about them, right? So he was like, yeah, I'll fix those engines and then we'll get these large propellers and we'll make a hovercraft and float it in the lake. So that's how the idea of aerial robotics started for us. Fascinatingly, because I was also sort of a student in charge of that innovation cell, I knew that unless it's an idea I can patent or we can patent, we'll not get funding from the institute. So in the search of something innovative is when we came up with this 4-rotor configuration that you see in all weddings today, back in 2004. And we built our first prototype in 2004 for that system. So that's the origin of how we got into making drones. And for about a period of 4 or 5 years from there till 2008, we had a lot of fun with the technology. When I quit my job and I came to IIT Bombay, again waiting for my colleagues to graduate, we used to take up these sustenance projects from IIT Bombay, which were all related to drone technology. We were having fun, but and we were also it was also helping us survive because those projects used to get us some small amount of money to pay our rent. But in 2008, when the attacks on Mumbai happened and we heard the news of the naval helicopters trying to peep into the 3rd and 4th floor of the Taj Hotel, we felt that this technology could have done a much better
Sure, absolutely.
assistance in that environment, and that's the reason why we felt that we should take this technology and make this into a product.
Absolutely,
So
brilliant.
that's how it started.
Do we have the videos, Shilpa?
So essentially, the drones that are shown here, we make them for last mile use by our soldiers. So they can take it in the field at the last mile on a backpack, deploy it for their protection. In many cases, now they don't leave a camp if a drone has not scouted their path ahead, so that they know that it is safe to actually travel that path. So they're doing road opening using drones. They're using a lot of these systems for, in the real world, creating a more safer environment for their operations in general.
I think the last I saw it, and I was very impressed with the movie Uri, I think, Yuri,
Yes,
whatever.
yes, yes.
I think that's where a drone was used.
Yeah, so fun fact, the 2009 movie that probably all of us are well aware of, it was an early prototype of ours that was in the movie.
The same movie which I'm talking about, Uri.
No, Three Idiots.
The Three Idiots, okay. Okay. All right.
So we in a way sparked the nation's imagination on this space.
Absolutely, absolutely. Shashank?
Yeah, so, my line of questioning largely would be from an investor perspective. And I have so many of these questions for you because you've had a fantastic journey, a very non-linear journey compared from a vantage point from an investor when we are investing in companies. And I'll get into that. So, I think most of you might know, Israel as a country has had a tremendous support from the government and also from the private ecosystem backing businesses in business to government. Right? And I feel Ankit's probably built the only standalone business which is backed, you've raised money, and I like to understand that journey, but also from a perspective that VCs in India do not invest in business to government businesses. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think we still have a lot to learn from ecosystem like Israel, but I'd love to understand when you started out, your fundraising journey and how investors reacted to your business model approach. And then obviously I have questions around the product, but that's later.
So, and it's a great question. I have this very vivid, experience that there have been events where we've gone, we've made a pitch, and we've had investors from the audience stand up and say, I have goosebumps on my hands. But we would never get funded. So, hardware startup in those days when we started our business was like a tiger out of his cage in a zoo. Everyone comes to the zoo to see the tiger, but nobody really wants to go near it, right? So, that's been our experience for many, many years. And to be honest, if you understand the business model for investors, I don't, now in retrospect, I don't feel that they were wrong in choosing that path. But yes, it is kind of challenging for them to even understand a hardware business's journey, and because a hardware business has a very different gestation period, a very different development period, and a very different cycle for adoption, and that kind of patience is probably not what that capital comes with very, very easily. Plus, when the timeline to results is long, it's probably hard for VCs to sort of take that bet and plunge. Particularly, our investing ecosystem is not that old in that one sense. It's sort of a early ecosystem. Maybe the Valley has backed a ton of such companies, and that's the reason why we see so many innovations coming out of the Valley as compared to India, even Israel for that matter. And B2G, of course, adds another layer of difficulty to our ability to raise capital, because B2G for a conventional investor has largely been about a lot of difficult money recovery cycles. That's what the conventional approach and experience has been, and that's the reason why they typically tend to stay away. Business tends to be a little bit more lumpy, but what they are not able to understand is that there is a lot more security in that business. Your money will come back. If you have done everything right, there is no way you will not get paid. So that is something which, it obviously takes a different kind of patience to get after, but that's been our truth for many, many years now. So in most cases, when we've convinced investors, it's because we have been able to demonstrate the ability to get our money back as well.
So help us understand your journey from seed to Series A and how the convincing cycle happened. Was it in equity form, debt form? And what was your learning curve till today? Now you're heading towards a new direction altogether.
Absolutely. So actually we got our first investment, all the way back in 2008. So that was the first angel investment we had in our company. And from 2008 till sort of 2015, in fact, one of the, sparks of that cycle of investment in our company is one of the gentlemen sitting here in the crowd, Mr. Rajesh Goyal. They had a small family office, and they invested and started the investment journey. So from a period of 2008 to 2015, we literally could not raise capital. And the only way one could survive in that time was on the strength of your product, because if the product doesn't make money, you'll basically have no business. So that builds, I think, a very different business in a company that you're making products to make money and to make enough money that you can fuel your own growth, right? So you try to make something which will be genuinely valuable to the end customer, and because it's genuinely valuable, the customer is willing to pay the, cost of building that, as well as you have to build something innovative, because if he gets that same performance from everybody else, you'll basically not get paid as much as you need to get paid to survive on your own. So that is one thing that happened. The other thing that happened was that, as a family business, one of the adages that my dad taught me when I was starting up was that debt is equal to death. So that is a very strong statement for a very young mind ki, if I take debt, I'll probably not be able to survive, right? So you have to, as an entrepreneur, when you are trying to survive, you have to break your own mind many times, and you have to break your beliefs. You have to go a level deeper and understand why is debt equal to death? what are the conditions in which it may not be equal to death, and how do you then build a business that can actually be sustainable of the fact that you need to survive till the time that inflection point comes and you're able to sort of ride a wave in that one sense. So yeah, I mean, it just takes a very different journey to get
Right,
where you are.
so two questions here, Ankit. One is, of course, the mindset of your family, which, how did you contend with, how did you kind of convince your father that it's okay for you to borrow? In fact, not just to borrow, but to go in for successive rounds.
No, so, I mean, I obviously, I had to rebel to start. So there was no convincing about anything else after. So I think for my family, given the background we had, entrepreneurship wasn't the most lucrative option for somebody who's just come out of IIT Bombay, right? I mean, I had
Absolutely.
far more lucrative options to go after than to do entrepreneurship. So
Right.
leaving a paying job and starting up is fairly high risk for a middle class family in that one sense. So yeah, I had to rebel. But I would say that I had the privilege that I could rebel. Many times we don't realize that just to have that privilege that you don't have a family that depends on you is something which, is the privilege you are doing your rebellion on. You can't do a rebellion on when your family depends on your ability to get that money home at the end of the month, right?
Very
So,
well said, yeah.
so I think for me, for many years, it's been counting our privileges and knowing that, if the privilege has been received, what are we going to do with it? I think that's been our journey in many cases.
Sure. The other thing which kind of intrigued me was, when I was trying to look at your profile, and I was very clear that I wanted you here in the last panel, and I'm so glad that you're here. What intrigued me was the fact that I have been speaking to people like Mr. F.C. Kohli when I wrote the book on Indian IT, TCS as the precursor to that, Mr. Harish Mehta, and all of them told me what has been the typical Babu mentality about any innovation. So I'm just wondering whether the technology that you came up with, to me it appears to be a product way ahead of its time. So how did you convince the government, because yours is a B2G business, so tell us about that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think drones was, just very, very fascinating for defense and homeland security in those days. And we had already started to see Israeli systems come into our operations, and these were much larger birds. And, surprisingly, the times when we started, government was never a bottleneck for adoption. Government was actually, and the people who were operating were actually very, very keen on adopting. It was
so the bureaucrats or the politicians?
Yeah. So typically we would largely interact with the bureaucrats, the people who were, managing a fairly large force, who are trying to get the best solution for their forces to prevent loss of life at their end, right? Or to be more effective in their operations. So we've never had experiences with people who were detractors of the technology, or maybe only those people, approached us. Okay. So therefore, I would not say that we had a very negatively minded customer, but we have a very, very myopic process of acquiring technology. Right. That process has to go through the same cycles as probably you can say, ration is bought for the armed forces. So when you're trying to buy innovation like ration is bought, you have to literally, it's like, asking that you filed a patent and you have a technology, and now I have to find 3 more guys who can do the same job. Right? So that's where things become
I think that requires a round of applause. That's amazing. Because everything has to be in the government. You have to get 3 quotes, 3 people, suppliers. And so if it's an innovation, how do you get 3 suppliers?
Yeah, so I think that was the bigger, I would say, bottleneck. The process was the bigger bottleneck for them to adopt, but it's never been the lack of willingness to adopt that's been our bottleneck in that one sense. So people have been very progressive, and these were the days when, just seeing something fly was good enough, right? And we used to have, and there's actually a very interesting, observation that I had. Like we would go and talk to the customer, and that time our drones would fly for about 30 minutes. And the customer, you would go and talk to them, and they'll be like, yeah, 30 minutes is बहुत कम है, minimum 1 घंटा तो उड़ना चाहिए, right? I mean, all of us are like that. When we buy stuff, we are never satisfied with what's in front of us. We just want something else.
What is the 30 minutes? I didn't get that.
So the flight time for the drone in those days, back in 2008-9 time frame, used to be 30 minutes of flight time.
All right.
And when you go to a customer and you tell them that I have a 30-minute system, they'll be like, 30 minutes is not enough. You need minimum an hour of flight time or whatever. And we would say that, sir, no problem, but at least see it fly once.
Sure.
I don't think we've had a demonstration where that same person who wanted a 60-minute flight stayed for more than 10 minutes to watch something fly. It was good enough for them to see it fly, and they were like, this is good enough for me, because they realized that when you are trying to do something, 10 minutes is pretty long. It's not like, so that taught us one thing, that, the fight in any business, the fight in product market fit is not the user's imagination. It is the user's experience that matters more. And that fight is absolutely, the crux of trying to build a product market fit. If you're racing against somebody's imagination, you would have spent millions of dollars building something that they imagined they need, but don't have the dollars to pay for.
Right, right.
So just some fun learning that I had.
Absolutely, brilliant. And you also spoke about the kind of technology that you have, which is used for multiple purposes. So I would like you to repeat that for the audience.
Yeah, so what we built, like I mentioned, we started off by trying to build these systems for surveillance operations at the very last mile for end users. But progressively, we also wanted to build a technology that will be useful for the enterprise side of the house. And that's when we started to build drones that could do mapping. And if you guys are aware of, there is this amazing mapping scheme that the government of India has called the Swamitwa scheme, where the government is mapping all the 660,000 villages in the country, all the Abadi areas where the villagers actually live, to create property cards for them using drone technology. That's the mandate of the program. They cannot use any other technology but drones to do that. And that kind of scale use of drones is in a way the first scale deployment of this technology in our country, and we were quite encouraged by this ask that the technology should deliver this outcome, and we are also a part of that operation at this point in time, and we've been helping them create the maps necessary for giving those property cards.
And the technology that you use for the farmers, that's also the end user is the government, the buyer is the government?
Yes, yes. Okay. Government of India departments.
Right.
Yeah. In some cases, it's also certain service providers who are providing this as a service to the government. So
sure,
in the end user is the government for this, because they have to make that property card, digitize it and give it to the farmers.
Sure. Shashank, all yours.
Just building on the question, you mentioned about the flight time at being 30 minutes, right? And we've evaluated companies. We've in fact invested in a small drone company out of IIT Delhi as well. And during the due diligence process, you definitely get into the product, right? I love to get your perspective, your journey from 15 plus years of operating IdeaForge, from 30 minutes to 1 hour timeline. What were the steps? How did you go through that journey of making product pivots, managing innovation with the existing team or bringing a new team? How is the decision making happening for product innovation?
So, see, one thing is that when we started this business, there was a very interesting experience we had. We used to participate in these competitions as students, like a lot of these international robotic competitions. You must have heard quite a few of them. So as a part of one of those competitions, we had won in India, and we had won in India with like a massive margin, like unfathomable margin. And when we went to represent our country in the international forum, we probably lost by an unfathomable margin. So that told us that gave us a very interesting lesson in life that it's not good enough to be locally best, right? And you have to benchmark yourself against the global best, and you have to deliver what's global best. Otherwise, you'll be exposed. And that fear has always kept us wanting to build what's the next best that we can deliver. And it has to be the best at the global scale. So that's the reason why we've always sort of been on our toes. There is these very, very famous fights we've had in our company where, you know, we had only 20,000 rupees to spend, and, you know, we could have either spent it on doing something better for our employees by buying a water cooler for them maybe, because it was a huge problem in summers, and or we could have bought 4 motors that would have built the next platform. And I think till date we would rather buy the motors than, you know, do anything else. So that's the DNA, and that's the reason why we've kept ahead of that curve for many, many years, and that's been our passion that's driven us.
And one question, and you know, ma'am, you can. So when you started out, you were a single founder, had teammates, building out the entire journey. As an individual, as a founder, from that point, and then the hustle and the working late hours and just the coolness, and you started in a time when startups weren't cool, right, much before that. To running and operating a company, which is large, systems and processes, it's a hardware-driven company, there are certifications required, you're dealing with the government, there are stringent procedures you need to follow. How has that journey been for you personally?
So, you know, again, a great question. I think, again, I've been really privileged to have a team that's, you know, as passionate as I am, first of all, and you can rely on them. And when you can rely on somebody intrinsically, it makes your life very, very easy. So I think that's not, you know, having a team has been the biggest blessing and in boon in this space. But what's more important is also that when you get somebody to work with you in an organization, you have to understand that what is it that they bring to the table. And if they bring to the table something which is better than your own knowledge in that area, then you have to let them execute in their way, right? You are only the custodian of the culture of the organization. You are only the custodian of the vision of the organization. And how that vision gets executed is something that a team will, you know, be able to deliver. And if we try to, you know, align everybody to our motivation, it's very hard. It's very, very hard to have everybody have the same motivation, right? Even within my, you know, founding team, there may be different motivations for doing what we are doing. But as long as the motivation is to do it and to do it well, I think we have to just align on that vision and get that done. So for us and for me particularly, I always try to get experience in. You know, I'd rather have that experience do the best that they know how to do rather than me trying to do it. So be it better systems in manufacturing, be it, you know, process orientation in areas that need tremendous process orientation. It's all been the people who have come on board with the right experience, you know, having that flexibility and freedom to build it out in a way that's congruent to keeping our DNA alive. That's the key.
Oh, I think that's very interesting, and I think this is a point which has been coming across again and again and again since the morning, that you may be the owner, you may be the founder, you may be the person who, you know, has put in your money. But I know Mr. Ramesh Agarwal ji, who was here this morning, he makes that one statement, ki malik ho, to malkiyat jo hai, if you are the owner, then you give that ownership to others and see them creating magic for you. And I think that's something which you're saying, and I think a lot of the others have also said, that teamsmanship, I think, is extremely important.
Absolutely, cannot agree more.
Right.
And you know, in a way, I was fortunate to have a founding team from the get-go, so that you know, single ownership mindset never came.
Right.
It was always collective ownership. So you know, it's not that hard to know that people have different skills and you can leverage those skills to do more.
Right.
Basically.
But I think building on Shashank's question, this a mindset of an entrepreneur is very different from the mindset of a large organization. So how do you transform from that owner, entrepreneur, I'll do many things myself, to bringing in systems and processes into place, attracting talent, retaining talent, nurturing talent? How do you do that?
So I think it's a very, very good question, because I was reading this, I was seeing this TED talk a few weeks back, and it was a very fascinating TED talk which said that carrot and stick approaches for leadership or for remuneration or for any of these areas where you're trying to build something new, where the solution is not known, they don't work. Like, they've been proven to fail in academics time and again, but all of us resort to carrot and stick only as a means of compensation. What it spoke about was something very interesting. It spoke about the fact that what works best when the solution is not known is when people have absolute autonomy.
Absolute?
Autonomy. To deliver
Absolutely.
the results. You're not focused on how they are solving the problem.
Right, absolutely.
They're driven by excellence. They're driven by their own need for mastery in a space.
Right.
And last but not the least, they're connected to your purpose.
Right, absolutely.
So I think as a leader, the only thing we can do is of the two things, is get out of their way of execution. And second is to get people who are connected to your purpose. I think it's also kind of hard to get people who are not connected to your purpose and expect them to deliver excellence.
It's extremely difficult.
So the filter has to be before they come in. Post facto, that filter can't be put easily.
Right. So I think on this point, I would also want to kind of leave this thought with many of the family businesses here. It's very important for you to recognize the culture that you have built and the person that you are hiring, whether that fit of that person with your culture is basically there or not. Because the difference between the entrepreneur and the family business owner is probably the owner wants others to do many things, whereas the entrepreneur possibly does not want others to do many things. He wants to try out everything himself.
Oh yeah, that's a massive problem, right? That can happen with any individual, to be honest. It's not just the owner, founder. I mean, anybody in your team could be somebody who would rather do it himself than wait for somebody to learn and get it done.
Right.
So that's a very common problem. Like, there's another very common saying, right, that you hire for skill, but you fire for attitude.
Right.
More often than not, that's the place where you go wrong, right? That you don't hire for attitude and hope that people will pick up the skill. I mean, of course, there should be some threshold, but that's usually what happens.
I'm going to just ask my last question, Shashank, before giving you the mic. So I think we have a lot of family businesses here. What would be your advice for them to invest in the startup ecosystem? How should they be looking at building synergies? I have some answers, but I would want to hear from you as well.
See, I can only share, things that, I believe in general. I believe that it is very important for a startup to have differentiated offerings, right? You cannot have just the same offering that everyone else has. And that offering cannot be masqueraded by just some buzzwords. Like, a lot of times buzzwords masquerade the fact that you're basically doing the same thing, right? So there is no differentiation in offering. And if there is no differentiation, it's ripe for disruption. So more often than not, investors would not want their investment to get disrupted for obvious reasons, right? So I think that is one factor, and IP helps. Having intellectual property really helps in protecting differentiation, and we are becoming savvy. I'm seeing some startups having the ability to protect their IP and not have people come and copy their IP just like that and get out without defending it. So that is one aspect that's very critical. And of course, the reason, is the entrepreneur doing it for the right reasons? That's another very important factor, because if the entrepreneur is not doing it for the right reasons, he'll be the first one to get out of in any difficult situation. And come what may, be it any startup, there will be difficulties. Like there is, if you have, if the business has lived long enough, it has seen several cycles of difficulties, and the staying power comes because you genuinely believe in your vision, or you genuinely believe in the purpose that you're doing it for. So if the entrepreneur is not doing it for the right reasons and is not building anything differentiated, then then God save that investment.
No, question was slightly different, Ankit. The question I was asking was, here we have more than 4,000 alumni, and we have a huge startup ecosystem. In my classroom, there are students, I think some of them are here today. Some of them say, ma'am, how do we compete with the startups? They work for valuations, they have deeper pockets than us. They're offering prices which are very low, and I know Professor Murthy and many of us say the same thing in the class, which is that don't go for the price, right? But having said that, what would be your advice for them not to be scared of, but to be part of the startup ecosystem? How can you look at leveraging the synergies between the startup and the family business ecosystem?
So apologies for not grabbing that earlier, but again, I think, see, if we are building something differentiated, it's very easy to collaborate. A lot of times when we are not building something ourselves which is differentiated,
Right.
there is a lot of fear that it will get copied and somebody else will, run away with the technology.
Right.
So ourselves doing something differentiated is, I think, extremely critical. When you are doing something differentiated, it gives you a lot of confidence to go and collaborate. And the whole world is about co-opetition now, right? You have Samsung, selling to Apple
Right.
the same screen that you find on the Samsung phone, right?
Right.
So we cannot be very, we cannot do everything. Any company cannot do everything. Everyone has to collaborate at some point in time, at some scale. And building differentiated offerings allows you to collaborate, and identifying that niche and knowing that we have differentiation here and we can pad differentiated offerings from others in certain areas and build a compelling solution is, I think, something that everyone has to recognize. But it's very challenging in our country. It's very challenging in India to have people collaborate at that level. It's not easy. I've seen that many years.
Sure, but
People
I think
don't collaborate.
one of the answers that you gave earlier on in your speech, I think kind of expresses that also, when you said Rajesh Goyal was the one who invested in us. Right at the beginning you said that. So maybe you need to be looking at startups which are in the kind of spaces either you are interested in, or which are going to be the trends, or which are going to be your competitors, and see whether you want to invest in them early on so that they are not your competitors.
Absolutely,
Right?
absolutely.
So my question is built up on this. I had a similar question actually.
So sorry.
No, but I think my question would be your advice to the, this is the 25th year of this program. A lot of family offices have been coming in. You've run a business before startups became cool in 2004 and building a business which was traditionally not a VC fundable business and yet achieves this measure, and coming from a family business background. So your input to the family businesses, is it right to think of startups getting funded, hence will my business sustain? Is that the right mindset? Second, we are in 2023. How have things changed, evolved for the betterment for India, and what smaller, bigger, medium-sized family businesses should be doing, irrespective of startup investments, irrespective of collaboration? Where is the opportunity for India in 2023?
So the first question regarding, should there be a fear, or how to look at the fact that in our own space there are more startups getting funded? I think that's a question that any business will have to ask itself in today's day and age, that is there a white space that we are leaving open? Is there something that we haven't thought about enough that is going to get disrupted? So first of all, I think we have to become entrepreneurial enough in our own businesses that we identify those gaps where we will get disrupted. And that foresight is going to be extremely crucial going forward, because if we are leaving white spaces, then the only way to plug those white spaces in the future is going to be by acquiring those companies who have built enough muscle in doing that. So if we are not able to identify that disruption early, then acquisition is another area where a lot of people should pay attention to, or investments, because that's another way of getting that disruption into your fold and make it a part of the journey. So, I mean, I think globally, all of this is, fair game in that one sense, and we will miss some buses, and we will have to therefore pay more to ride on that wave if it is causing disruption to us, if it is the only way in which we can grow our business as well. On the other hand, if we can be smart enough to identify gaps early, we can prevent disruption happening from our businesses, right? And that's true for us as well.